do we want to maybe intro, how you go from making, chemical based products and some other stuff, obviously in the oil and gas industry, you talked about your first one, talk about some other stuff. How do you get into the kind of consumer goods? You talk about, sprays earlier at the beginning of the video.
Mhm.
Is there anything you want to touch on? Like what makes you go from, hey, I was doing this to, oh, let me try and make products that, might be able to be sold to a, just normal consumer?
For me, which is also, it's a very personal story. This is tough to relate to others. For me, I found early in my career that I did have a technical aptitude in formulating interesting solutions to solve problems. So that my entree view to that was just in oil and gas, but I went into construction chemicals and architectural goods, so I could start to cross over categories. I was introduced to consumer products vis-a-vis a company that was a contract manufacturer for us in some of our industrial businesses, and they were producing a lot of aerosols. And I sort of said, that's interesting. And I started to take a look at those products. And so when you're developing chemistries for oil and gas applications, especially those that are used in production systems, for me, I was formulating corrosion inhibitors for gas transmission lines. In that scenario, you really have to formulate for two masters. You have to formulate your product to have a very specific, efficacy and or sensory experience that you're trying to achieve on one side. But on the other side, you have to make sure that it's stable and compatible in hydrocarbon gas or natural gas. So you sort of have to formulate for two masters, which can be really tricky. And when I was introduced to aerosols, as I started to delve into those products technically, that was the exact same environment as the original oil and gas environment, because most of the propellants used in industrial aerosols are hydrocarbon gases. So you have to formulate your aerosol, like for example, here's a glue, right? This is a spray glue, and so we've got to formulate the glue and the resin and so on and so forth to provide adhesion and strength and tensile strength and all the attributes that we're trying to achieve. You have to formulate that product, but you also have to formulate it in its propellant, which is a hydrocarbon gas. So you have to make sure that that is a compatible environment and it's not going to kick out or cause the product to fail or clog. So I was already, by coincidence, used to kind of formulating in that dynamic where you had to formulate for two masters. And so all of a sudden it opened up, myself to, really consumer products. And as a formulator, I sort of had a field day, and I was taking very old school technologies and bringing them into the future, and all the entrepreneurism was raging. And we developed technologies in paints and coatings and adhesives and household products and lubricants and automotive and motorcycle. And we were formulating and developing new tech across a wide variety of categories. And the company that we were doing it for was a private label manufacturer, a co-packer. So they had exposure to all these different channels. Now, I later ended up acquiring that company because they had such great skill set, and we've, substantially grown it from there. But that's really the intro point.
So, I mean, to some people, it kind of feels like luck, that you were kind of in the right spot at the right time. But,
Yeah.
You said, is there anything else? Like, you now stayed in, at least looking at your showroom, you've now stayed in kind of that, segment, obviously consumer products. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Well, we stayed in sprays and aerosols. And so the question was why? And so, yes, it was fortuitous that I was kind of thrown into that landscape, and it was odd that I was coming from industrial Alberta in oil and gas and formulating products, and now I'm down, in California formulating in the same environment. One's industrial, one's, yes, that was, luck. But after our due diligence, we started to recognize that this aerosol world, back in early 2000s, was really becoming out of vogue. Right? There was safety concerns, and certain states didn't want these plants there anymore because they can be dangerous places, and there was environmental concerns, and so there was all this sort of kind of a growing sort of potential disdain on the industry itself. And what we were finding was that the corporate community in that channel was really aging, and the younger generations were not coming into the industry at all. So there was this real brain drain. And you had kind of these regional aerosol players all across the country that were successful businesses, but, you know, the owners, their kids wanted nothing to do with them. And they were kind of sort of, you know, becoming antiquated. And so this is where I saw a huge opportunity. This is where I said, you know what, guys, we got to double down, and we got to really start to make some significant acquisitions in this channel, and also outside of the channel, right? Because, you know, sunscreen is a spray too, or cooking sprays is a spray too, or whipped creams is a spray too, or over-the-counter sprays for the, you know, pharmaceutical or household cleaning, right? So insecticides. I mean, we touch all these different categories, but the reason why I felt it was an opportunity is because everyone was running from it. And so I started to run towards it and thought that there was a really large opportunity to acquire very valuable facilities that are very tough to construct, almost impossible. They're very difficult to run, which we consider a big moat around the industry. And there was no real new technology that was popping up. And so that happened to be one of our fortes. So, you know, I think Warren Buffett says, go where they ain't. And that's kind of what we did.